Welcome to Aware. We are dedicated to communicating information that inspires your positive growth and change. Are you interested in a peaceful planet? Are you interested in optimal health? Are you living with purpose? Are you enjoying your life? We realize each person can make a difference, and our mission is to empower your awareness. The choices that you make in every moment shape your life, and we encourage you to realize that you have your own answers and to always listen to your own truth. We invite you to stay aware. Hello and welcome to the Aware Show. I am Lisa Garr, and it's just such a joy to be here with you today. I always look forward to this show because it's like an hour-long meditation for me. I get to speak with incredible and brilliant people that communicate information that inspires positive growth and change. And for me, it's just a zone. So I hope you enjoy it as well. And I invite you into my zone with me because today we're talking about something very, very fascinating. And by the way, wanted to let you know you can listen on demand at any time as well on our podcast. Just go to The Aware Show and anywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can check out our show right there at any time. Download it, share it with friends if you find something interesting you'd like to share. And that's definitely the case today. We're going to be talking about something called Family Constellations. So, have you ever experienced, maybe you had a traumatic event happen where you got fired, or you were in an accident, or you had some difficult news, or you remember the day where you had a breakup or something significant that happened. And then every time in a cyclical pattern, that same time next year and the year following and the year following, you create another similar struggle or trauma or accident or something continues to happen. And this systemic dynamic can stay in place for years to come if it's not recognized. And it actually has happened years prior, maybe even generations prior, without you even knowing it. It could also be the same situation for organizations, corporations, businesses, families, cultures. It goes very, very deep. And that is this incredibly brilliant and vast field called family constellation work. And joining me today is Judy Wilkins-Smith. She is a highly regarded individual who understands these family patterns. Her book is all about these patterns, called Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint. It's a powerful guide to transform through disentangling multi-generational patterns. She works with conferences, leadership conferences, individuals, and Fortune 500 companies that really, once they get this work, it changes these limiting cycles and reframes challenges going forward. So welcome, Judy. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Lisa. It is lovely to be with you today.
I think this is just such fascinating work, and I love that it's in the corporate sector and leadership sectors as well as families and individuals. It's a vast body of work, interesting enough to get your mind wrapped around in a big way. So let's talk about this. I just first of all needed to find out, how did you even get interested in family constellation work?
It found me. I was
Mm.
busy writing books at the time. My father had just been killed. We'd moved to the US. Dad was killed here. And it was a question of, do I write books or do I go crazy? And I decided writing books was probably a better idea.
Oh
So,
my goodness, that's a
yeah,
big deal.
it was a
That
big deal. So I started writing the book. It was actually a fiction book and stumbled into this. And the person said, come study this work and I'll help you with a book. So I went and studied the book and got zero, at least studied the work, got zero help with the book. But I began to understand that there was something profound about this work, that it could shift people in ways I hadn't seen. So fast forward to years later when I'm doing this systemic work in constellations, and somebody says to me, well, of course you know what you're doing. And I went, what? And they said, you come from South Africa. That's where it was born. I didn't know
oh,
at the time, but that's where it began. And it began with a gentleman by the name of Bert Hellinger, who went down there as a missionary to go and tame the Zulus, and instead the Zulus tamed him. But stranger still was the fact that my background is in healthcare. And when I left South Africa, the guy who gave my farewell speech was a Zulu gentleman. And he said, "You may be leaving us, but you'll find a way to represent us in the world." And I went, "Yeah, yeah." And now I do it every day.
Oh my goodness. So I didn't know that that was originated in South Africa.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this because many people are fascinated with their ancestry and they look at ancestry.com and so forth. There's lots of family trees on there, but little do people know that there's a very important piece that's missing in there about their heritage. Let's talk
Exactly.
about that.
Exactly. So, as you said, there are lots of family trees, over 100 million of them, which tells us that people know something. They know that this is important. What and ancestry and the genealogy sites give are, here's where you belong. That's number one. That's genealogy 1.0. What they don't go into is how events and where you belong matter and how they color your life. And this is the work that we do. As you said earlier, when you were doing the intro, you were talking about how patterns can cycle down through generations, and you put it beautifully. There is a significant event. Now, it may not seem like an earth shattering one to you, but it is to me, or it's significant to me. And the minute that event happens, I have a reaction. And with the reaction, I begin to create sentences and feelings and thoughts and actions to keep that all in place. And so what happens is after a while, that becomes the truth. But it's not the truth. It's just your truth. And you can change that anytime you want to. And when those patterns cycle all the way down through your emotional DNA, and they sit with you, they're asking you to let what needs to rest and to begin a new pattern. And that is the purpose of these patterns. It's never to punish, it's not the sins of the father, it's the opportunities of the children.
I have to ask you, so if this were the case, you would look at the Great Depression here in this country in the
Right,
20s,
right.
and there was a massive depression at that time, and people were starving and hungry, and there was very little money. Wouldn't everyone now be incredibly poor if that was the case?
No, and yes. No, and yes. So the no, you're going to have one demographic who go, "Oh, I can do something with this," and the other one who says, "I'm wiped out."
Uh,
But it goes even further. I have people who had parents in the or grandparents in the Great Depression, and they have hoarder mentality. They may be wealthy, but they can't spend. They recycle everything. So they're still carrying on the pattern. They cannot enjoy their wealth because if grandmother couldn't and mom couldn't, how dare I? And so often we don't dare do better than the ones who came before us. The paradox, of course, is that the system is asking us to do better because that's how systems evolve. So as soon as you become conscious of the fact that you're holding a pattern for someone else and you can put that down, what you can do is give them a legacy instead of commiseration, which does nobody any good.
so you can give them a legacy, an idea of how to move forward with something. But I just want to break it down a little bit further. So, say I didn't know my grandparents who were in the Great Depression, yet my parents were a result of that parenting. So they handed that down to me, that level of poverty consciousness.
Of course,
And
scarcity consciousness, poverty
gives,
consciousness, totally.
but that came in the form of something like a job loss, a layoff, a firing, those types of things, right? So
Right.
then I saw that my mother maybe get laid off and fired or whatever she experienced. And so I take that on as my emotional DNA and it becomes
Yes.
my blueprint. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So in that, it's just so fascinating. You as invite anyone who's listening to this or watching this to think back on your family systems, your family patterns, and where the conversation of money came from and how many people in your family patterns in your family history had struggled with money and if you have those same unconscious beliefs. That's step one. But step two is how do you become, now that you're aware of it, how do you possibly change it if it's that deeply rooted in your emotional DNA?
Okay, so if it's that deeply rooted, what you want to ask yourself is, what have I made this mean about me? And what have I made this mean about others? What have I made it mean about prosperity and abundance? What is the cost? And what is the opportunity? When you can start to get even just the teeniest bit excited at the idea that, by the way, money may be a friend, not a commodity, it's actually a relationship. When you can just see the teeniest opportunity, a different thought begins to percolate. So it's never the whole shebang that happens at a time, unless you're at an event, in which case, caveat, it can shift very quickly. But when you're reading the book, when you're working with it, it's literally one new thought, one new feeling, one new action at a time. And I always say to people, when I started out with a money piece, because I had some of that going on too, I went for a money walk. And I can remember clearly going, okay, God, we need to talk. Universe, whoever you are, we need to talk, because I need to do something about money. This is not working. Can I speak to money? And there wasn't much except sort of a bit of a feeling of a chuckle. And I started speaking to money the way you would to love or to any of those. And it sounds goofy, but I did. And I realized, hey, I had been around money and rather loved it as a little kid, collecting seeds and then collecting charms, or these were all forms of currency. And I can remember laughing and then crying and then laughing and crying. And on the way back, when I said to money, I really want to understand you more. I want to start with different thoughts, different feelings, different actions. I know I've got to rewire my brain. There was a very different feeling inside me. There was a feeling of possibility. On the way back, I picked up a $1, a $5, a $10, a $20, a $50, and a $100, and people were walking over them. And I started to laugh, and I thought, oh my, what else? If you could do this with something like money, hold on. So relationships are the same, leadership is the same, you name it. Once you start to hone in on it and you start to focus and see it, which, by the way, is the beauty of a constellation. Once you can see it, hear it, feel it, taste it, touch it, you suddenly realize that there is an entire world that up until now has been invisible. And the minute we make it visible and conscious, we have this whole new toolbox to play with.
All right. So I would love to know, what are family constellations? What do they look like, if you can give us a visual?
Sure. So first of all, it's important to know that there are not just family constellations. You pointed it out earlier. That's why we call it systemic work and constellations, because it's now migrated over to organizations as well. But basically what it looks like is this. We try to solve problems in our heads. We have issues, we try and work it out. Maybe we even scribble it down on a piece of paper, but that doesn't always do the trick. With a constellation, it's a 3D representation of what you've got in your brain. So you may say to me, let's take the Great Depression. I really struggle with abundance around money, really struggle. Okay, let's have a look at where that came from and who it belongs to and how it shows up for you. So let's pick a representative for mom, for dad, maybe for the grandparents, and one for you. And at a live event, you would pick those live representatives, and I would say to you, okay, Lisa, now I want you to give me a spatial representation of that. So I want you to position them in relationship to one another.
Wait, how do you pick a representative? Is it a human? Do you put a
human,
plant there? I mean, what do you choose for the representative?
although it's a human at a live event, if I'm working with executives or one-on-one, then I will use pieces of paper. And what we'll do is we'll identify the relevant parts of that system, and each one gets its own piece of paper, and we place that on the floor. So if it's an event, you're picking a live representative. And here's the beauty of that. So I say to you, give me a spatial representation of that. You could put mom and dad together. Maybe you think grandma for you was always over in the distance. Grandfather was turned away, so he was disconnected. You were either close to mom and dad or perhaps between mom and dad. in which case you would put a representative for yourself between mom and dad. And what happens is this: for the first time, you're seeing it. And instead
Yes.
of trying to figure it out here, you're seeing it. And we know that humans are really good at transferring emotions onto different objects or inanimate objects. And so,
Ah,
yeah,
wait, pause one sec. So that's how, so I've done this, and it was a room that was like just
right.
a dining room that was cleared, and there were different pieces of paper that I assigned to different relatives in my life that I was vaguely aware of. So my grandfather was over here and my mother was over there, and I had all these different relationships, and I had a mentor in the center. And so that's what you're saying. So imagine just like a dining room cleared out and pieces of paper on the floor, or a conference room with pieces of paper on a table, right?
Yep. Or a live event with live people. So if you have live people, now you're looking at people as well. So imagine that for the first time, you're seeing this live representation in 3D of what you've carried inside your mind. Now, what I do and what facilitators in this work do is we're trained to then have a look at the system. Tell me about your mom. Why is she standing all the way over there? What happened to dad? Why is he turned away? Goodness, I see that you always stand between mom and dad. That's pretty heavy. You've had to become really big to carry a lot. What's that about? So by asking those questions, you're now seeing it, you're hearing it, you're touching it, you're walking through it, you're feeling it. And as we're working, I've already asked you questions about the issue, and I listen very carefully to the language that you use so that I can use it in service of you as we progress. So you might say, I really struggle with money. I can't look at money. I can't look at money. It's just too difficult. Well, by the end of the constellation, and having seen where that comes from and how it played out and how it's echoed down as this pattern, you will often find that someone like you will turn around and say, oh my goodness, I can look at money and it's beautiful. So it
Because that problem wasn't mine in the first place, that I never owned. I somehow took it on, but it wasn't mine.
now the opportunity is there for me to do it differently. And it's, hey, money, can we be friends? So you start to rewire the brain, you rewire the heart and the gut. And now, of course, you're not reliving ancient history. Your future is no longer your predictable future. It can't be. And something entirely different is possible for you.
Okay, a few questions about this process. So,
Sure.
if it's a live event and you have real people, are they actually role playing the grandfather? Do they speak at all?
Okay. So here's where some more of the magic comes in. We're very capable of sensing into each other's systems. We don't always realize that, but we are. If you think about some of the shootings that have happened recently, and when you see that, or how even some of the politics is played out, and we're really angry or really whatever we are, we're sensing in to those systems. And representatives find themselves standing in what we call the knowing field, or perhaps the collective unconscious, and they are able to key in really accurately. And so you'll have clients going, how? How is it possible? I have representatives who say, how could I feel that? You're very capable of feeling that. And we're accurate barometers and sensors for each other's systems. And so they get feedback from the representatives that is usually pretty darn accurate.
Okay, wait, for you could actually go into, say, for example, the shooter from the most recent event in Texas, where you're from.
Right.
You can look into the family constellation of that person and his grandmother, who he also took the life of, and the parents where they were. You could look into that system using this work.
You could only look into his system if it affected you. That's one of the pieces of this work. You don't go ferreting around just for curiosity.
Right. Yeah.
However, if it affects you and you're going, I am so affected by this, I can't pull free. It's tweaking something in your system. And then absolutely, we would set that up to see, so what is this reflecting for you that you're picking up that's also asking to be resolved in your system?
Fascinating. Okay. So you could say maybe, and you could, and now this is imaginary work also. I want to make sure that people understand this is a visual work, that you could discover maybe there was a murder in your, you know, distant way back ancestry or history or something like that, that you feel intuitively, which is why these school shootings light you up and you could never understand why before.
It's possible if you go and look in my work. I do not assume and I do not make up. If I don't have the facts, we may know there's something there, and we may work to change that for you without knowing exactly what it is. But I am not about to tell you, oh, obviously you had a murder in your family. No.
Right. Right.
It's
No,
that
this is
something is
imaginary work.
changed.
This is,
I
yeah.
would say to you, what is happening for you? I feel overwhelmed. When did you first ever feel overwhelmed? What was happening in your life at the time? When did you feel like you were at the mercy of someone else? And that will come up for you. It's pinging something in your own system. So it is deeply truthful work. But it is not something that you go and make up.
Okay. Great to know. And after this happens and after you go through this exercise, what continues to unfold psychologically, mentally after this exercise?
So again, as with many modalities, it depends on you. But if you're sufficiently moved and intrigued and committed enough, this is where you begin to rewire and rewire and rewire. And the minute you've got that one new feeling, one new thought, one new action, of course, other possibilities start to pop up. So it's, oh, well, if I don't have to worry about money, what else could I do? So now you're swinging in a completely different direction. We use this for traumas and we use it for triumphs, because what we're teaching as well is you're laying down neural pathways consciously this time. We're so used to doing it unconsciously in reaction to, now you're doing it consciously and clearly. And because you're doing that, you're in control of the kind of life that you're shaping.
Mm. So you're putting it into present time awareness and then moving forward from there with present time awareness.
Present time awareness and what we also call forward anchoring. If you have a big goal over there, and you can anchor into that feeling, which we can do. Think about when you're going to go on vacation. You're not there yet, but you're super excited. You can
Yeah.
feel that ocean over there. It has got your name on it. You're super pumped. You know what it feels like. If we can get you to anchor into purpose and goal, and you can feel it, you pull yourself past all of the old excuses, all of the old patterns, and now you're swinging around towards the purpose and the goal.
Fascinating. Now, can I ask you where it comes to something like health? Because health, you can look genetically to see if someone is predisposed for cancer in the family history and things like that.
Yeah.
How is this different than looking at a health history genetically and what you might have expressed of that history in present time?
Okay, so I want to go to something like the Great Dutch Hunger Winter, which I think will explain it beautifully. So in the Great Dutch Hunger Winter, the Germans encircled an entire city. And I think it was for about 4 months, people lived off what they could find, roots, bulbs, rats. It was not pretty. What also happened was after that, because it was an intact group, they studied the women who had been pregnant at the time and their children for 4 generations. The women being pregnant at the time gave birth to children who, depending on when they'd gotten pregnant during this whole situation, either expressed malnutrition or obesity and cortisol level problems. But it wasn't just them, because that had been tweaked epigenetically, that the imprint had happened onto the system. And because that had been tweaked, not only was it thoughts, feelings, actions, but the body was being changed as well. And that continued for 4 generations. We've seen that with the Holocaust. We've seen it with 9/11, same thing. So when it comes to health, in this case, what they had to do was then to be able to say, I know this lives in my family. I know the event that started it. What can I do differently to begin swinging back to health? Back then, they didn't have the resources they do now. How do I get healthy so that I'm not diabetic? How do I get into a healthy frame of mind so I'm not malnourished or anorexic? So it was swinging that back around gently. With many health conditions, if it runs in families, I say to people, hey, this is not a big woo-woo thing. This is take a look, see what's there, and look at the one step you could take, because every step you take starts to swing the health pattern back into possibility. So
And
it
change the future generations, which would be
exactly,
the whole point. If you have children or siblings, or you could start to change the trajectory going forward.
very much. I had a gentleman who said to me, all the men die at 50. He came and we did a piece of work and he said, I don't want to. I have children I want to see. And he changed everything lifestyle wise, and he's still going happy and strong. It just means he became aware, and this is what this work does. It makes the unconscious conscious and the invisible visible, and now you can do something.
The unconscious conscious and the invisible visible. All right, so the unconscious part in corporations, I read earlier that you've worked with Fortune 500 corporations and their leaders and their executives. How does this type of work manifest in a corporation, or is it just specifically because of the leader in that corporation?
Two ways. So yes, it's often the leader, and of course an organization has emotional DNA too, because surprise surprise, it's made up of people. But yeah, it often begins for me with a leader who will say, okay, I need an extra edge. I want to know what else I can do to be an even better leader. And so we have a look at, I will do a deep dive into his family system and his career and see, how did you come to be this leader in this way? But we have other things. You could see things like a company that is risk averse. And when we have a look and I say, tell me the history, they'll say, well, yeah, back in the day when that happened, we said never again. So now that's echoed all the way down, and they're wanting to expand, but they can't because they're risk averse. And so we have a look at what pattern needs to rest. It was good at the time, but it's outlived its usefulness, and it needs to rest so that the new pattern can swing in. And the other thing that's important is that the pattern that wants to rest is in service of the pattern that's trying to surface, which is in turn in service of the pattern that wants to rest.
Can you give us an example of a company that you've worked with as
Yeah,
a maybe a
yeah,
story? Okay.
exactly that. They were risk averse. It was, we can't do that. Somebody had made, a CEO had made a decision. It was a great decision. And along came 2008. And 2008, everything went bang. He was actually fired because he'd made the choice. But I mean, it really wasn't his fault. But they also watched many people being laid off. And the then CFO said, never again, not on my watch. So fast forward, CFO becomes CEO and he's still going, never again, not on my watch. And he's got new blood coming in and they're going, what are you doing? There goes opportunity number one. There went opportunity number two. We had to go back and say to him, you've got to give this to the CEO. It's not yours to carry anymore. You can't do that. You can tell all the people who you had to let go, I'm so sorry, but look at what I'm doing now. In honor of you, you couldn't be there, but I've taken care now. And really begin swinging his language around. So he wasn't at the mercy of this language that had him caught too.
Right. Fascinating. I wonder if this type of system can be identified with, like, on a meta scale, like our country that's gone through over and over again uh, civil unrest, it's gone through protests, it's gone through massive political divide. How could you look at something like our country, and even when it comes down to these shootings and so forth, have we cyclically repeated this in the last several hundred years?
I would say yes. And I would say the reason for that is because we haven't been taught to look in this way. It just becomes another one of those things. We don't consciously say, this happened. What can we take from this? What do we want to set down? And there's another piece. If you look at the civil unrest and the political divides, it's simply a case of both groups, all sectors, in some way feel unseen, unrecognized, unwelcome, demonized. So everybody is fearful of not having a place. For this to move forward, everybody belongs. And this is one of the basic pieces of any system. Everybody has a right to belong. Everybody belongs. Anybody's excluded, they're going to pop up again in the next generation, and the next generation, until everybody is seen and membered into the system. So if we want it to stop, it's a case of everybody belongs. Everybody has a place. And we cannot demonize the past, and we cannot demonize different groups. We all belong.
It seems that that was the original intention of what the Constitution was to do, in the United States at least, was to bring parties into agreement, but it was probably created because there was a division. So essentially, it was based on the divide, right?
Beautiful, yes. And the
Okay.
divide is a beautiful thing because it ignites the passion for unity. And I look at our great divide now, and at some point, we're going to look at this and go, we can't do this. We've got to come together. But
I wonder.
maybe this time we do it with our eyes wide open. Again, if we demonize any, you're going to see the kind of mass shootings that we have. You're going to see political divides because people are afraid that they're about to be marginalized or excluded. So they take action.
Because they were originally marginalized and excluded, like women
Exactly.
and African Americans, yes.
And
Yeah.
and here's even worse. If we don't work with that, then yesterday's victim becomes tomorrow's perpetrator 10 times worse. And it just, yeah.
The cycle continues.
The
In
cycle.
your experience in South Africa, was that the original intention of the Zulus, was to bring about the awareness of the cyclical violence and unrest?
Not at all.
No.
No, the Zulus just had, in fact, many of the black tribes, there are 9, had this inherent wisdom. They were still very deeply connected to the generations before them, and many are still. A lot of that's being lost, which is really unfortunate, but there's still a lot that's there. And they understood, if something is going on in my life that is not good, I need to go and have a look back there to see what's happened, because this is affecting me right now. I'm the latest member and I'm expressing it. So no, it wasn't about the violence. It really was about the connection to the wisdom of the ancients.
That was the basis of this work.
Absolutely.
Interesting. And so you're saying that this could work in many, many different ways, on the meta scale and on the micro scale individually, where we can start to break through patterns, which is why things like protesting is great, and having your voice heard in demonstrations is fantastic, because it brings awareness to the pattern and then gives us an opportunity to create new language to create new patterns.
Yes or no? It depends. This is what I teach leaders. It's great that you have genius and insight. If you cannot land it in a way that others can hear it, you've got nothing.
What do you mean?
I'm angry with you. Pay attention to me. You've marginalized me. How dare you? All that's going to do is get somebody else's back up. When I come to you and I say, hey, I have value. Let me show you what I have. Let me show you what I can do. I'm going to go, oh, that's interesting. But we don't. And I listen to it at the moment. I hear it's tiring. I hear it in commercials. Fight for our rights. Fight the bad disease. Stop fighting. Invite. Really stop fighting. Invite. Invite people to see who you are. Invite people to understand your value. And yes, sometimes it's going to be a bit of an uphill climb, but if you're committed and you want your place, you'll get there, and so will they.
I have seen a lot of that happening. There have been the protests that were on the backs of the protests years and years prior and years prior. Now we're starting to see more action, and where we're actually starting to see more, it's starting a little bit more equity in our workplace, a little bit more, balance, even representation and inclusion on in the media. At least we're starting to see glimpses into it. So the action
Absolutely.
is finally happening. I believe has, I think, a lot to do with social media. I honestly think the world is more connected and more people can adhere to a movement than ever before. I
What I'd
believe
love
personally.
to see us do, I think you're right. Well, what I'd love to see us do is move. I think our next best step as humanity is moving from anger to possibility, or from fear to possibility. When you start to look at what's possible instead of how angry you are, oh my goodness, things are so different. I keep
Possibilities.
pointing out to people, you're on an adventure. Adventures don't just go this way, guys. They do this. They're like stocks. They don't trend in one direction as we're seeing at the moment. But
Forever,
if you
yes.
keep, exactly, but if you keep with it, they will trend in the direction you want. So don't get disheartened. You're in the middle of a big adventure. Go for the adventure. Make it happen, commit to it, and shift from anger to gratitude. Shift from fear to possibility. With just those two shifts in emotions, it changes the world.
That I love that. Looking at possibility instead of fear. Now, one of the things you're talking about here is languaging, and I noticed that you are a Napoleon Hill trainer. And I love Napoleon Hill. He wrote Think and Grow Rich, and some of the most way ahead of his time. He wrote that in what, the 40s?
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
And what is a trainer of that work? That's a great idea. To train his work is a wonderful idea.
Gosh, yeah, I'm qualified. I don't say I'm a trainer of that, but I am qualified in that. But he had a really smart insight. The way you stock your mental library affects the way that you stock your emotional library. And the way that those two cooperate determines your truth. Because the minute you tell yourself something and the body buys it, it's just become the truth. And he had it. He said that very clearly, and he is absolutely accurate. We are master spellcasters. We don't realize it, but we are. We tell our children, you'll never be any good at. You're no good at this. You can't do this. And the kids go, okay. Or we say to them, you're incredible. And these kids kind of straighten up and they go, well, watch me. We are literally either stunting ourselves or developing wings, depending on what we tell ourselves and believe. It's all us.
Hmm. It's fascinating to me that this is not new. This is
It's
not
not.
new language. It's been around, for a very long time. It might be considered woo-woo language, and it isn't. This has been around for, I mean, think about Stephen Covey and, you know, all of the work that has been in existence for such a long time talking about the potential human, Gene Houston,
Oh my
the
goodness.
possible human. Yes.
We
Yes.
are so filled with capability and potential. We need to start flipping into that mindset. We really do. I mean, you see it every day where somebody is told, you'll never walk. I was told. Actually, I wasn't. I went for surgery on my neck. They told my parents she will be paralyzed from the neck down, but they forgot to tell me. And so I'm not. I'm what they call an intact quadriplegic. Yeah. It's so much of it has to do with your mind. So much.
Those two words don't even go together.
Nope. Yeah,
Well, that was very forward thinking of your parents not to tell you.
it was my mom. She said to me, "You tell her anything like that, we're going to have a problem." So they didn't.
That is fantastic. And I do, I love that, especially if you have received, we actually, here's a question I have for you. So doctors give diagnoses because that's what they're in the business of, is telling you what the problem is and to protect themselves,
Right.
what could go wrong.
Yeah.
How do you change the languaging after you've received the diagnosis or gotten the big C? How do you reframe that inside your mind?
Yeah, and that's a big one. And look, I will never demonize doctors for that. I mean, I grew
They
up in
have
that.
to.
They have to do that. It doesn't make
Hmm.
it easy though, because what I discovered, I was very ill, not with this, but a while ago, very ill, and was fortunate enough to be ill enough to know that I was in serious trouble. And I say fortunate because during that, what I discovered was this: it isn't the disease that kills you, it's the fear. We
Mm.
start to shut down very quickly, and then our body cannot cope. So any coping mechanism it may have had, we shut down with the brain. And so for me, what I had to do was think about what it would be like to be teaching again with large groups, and really anchor there and keep my mind there. Because anytime I didn't know, I was so scared I wanted to curl up. So
Mm.
it's not a question of, oh, well, you're amazing and you just change your mind. No, it is work. It is work. But I also had to watch what I was telling myself. I can't do this. Excuse me. Yes, you can. This is too much. What do you mean this is too much? You've done so many days. We're on the mend. I'm weak. No, actually, you took two more steps today than you did the other day. It's
Mm.
really it's buddying yourself into the right frame of mind and the right frame of feeling. And the feelings are the juice. You could, it's like saying, I want to think and grow rich. It's not going to happen unless you are really thinking those thoughts and feeling that feeling, because not because there's this whimsical little universe, you will shut down any possibility of that happening. And I'll tell you what I mean. Way back, we had very little money, went to a casino. One of my top values still was ethics and honor. So we go to the casino. Gosh, we could have used some extra money. And I had my mother-in-law's tin and mine. And I put 3 coins in and I hit a jackpot and realized I'd taken them out of her tin. Now, any sane human being would have taken 3 coins and put them in. Not me. I went to her and said to her, I hit the jackpot, but it was out of your tin here. And she took it. And that was my first clue that it didn't matter how much poor money came looking for me. I was just pushing it away so hard the poor thing couldn't get near me. I
Ah,
had to change
fascinating.
my thoughts and change my feelings before it even had a shot at a relationship with me.
That is a huge awareness. So you gave the money to your
Yeah,
mother-in-law, and it was not going to go through you at all.
no, not because honorably I had taken it from her, so it belonged to her. I mean, really seriously, I still think about it now, and I think, what? But money couldn't come near me. I found, because I'd also been raised not with my parents, but it's better to be poor. You can have love or money. It's educate rubbish. Boy, did I have to re-educate myself.
So how did you do that? What did you do? Because it's not a one-step process. This
No,
is
it is
a
not.
practice, right?
Thanked money every time some came in. Really thanked it. Didn't just go, oh, good, there's a check. Really thanked it. Got super tickled by every penny that came in. Was so open to anything that was coming in. Of course, I always had my be ethical and honorable sitting over here, but was so tickled. I couldn't wait to see it coming in. So I really began to look for ways that could find me. And my creative brain switched on because I wasn't in survival brain anymore. And my heart opened, and it's always about the heart opening. And the gut settled, and it was like, I can do this. And so it was celebrating every little win to almost build that winner effect.
Well, except though you had to be aware of the pattern in the first place. I've seen people do
Absolutely.
this where they write the check to themselves and put it in their wallet, or they put all of the bills in one direction. But if they don't have the belief system behind it and they're just canceling it out, there's,
Well, absolutely they are. But again, it goes back to that. You can tell yourself that here all day long. If it doesn't connect to the heart and the feeling system, it's not the truth. I mean, I could say to you, you're a really bad person, and you go, I'm a really bad person. I'm not. You just, no, I'm not. You can
you can,
feel
that's what
it.
the muscle testing is good for, right?
Exactly. But the minute that I say to you, you're awful, and you go, oh, I'm terrible, you can feel it in your heart, you can feel it in your gut, and it's just become a truth for you. So if you're going to go do the money stuff, don't do it here, because if you're doing it here, you're wasting your time. But if you're doing it
Mm.
here and you're connecting with the joy of it and the possibilities, and if you can, give it places to go to. So for me, it was one day I'm going to have timeshare at Disney. I have that now. But I saved all the little extra pieces, knew where to go because they were going to that. So it became fun. Money became fun.
Hmm. So this actually is a great question. I mean, if you don't know how to create it, you say into the future, one day I'm going to have.
I did. That was no, that was important for me. I went to Disney once and I looked at that and I saw all of these people coming out of Beach Club, which is where I have my timeshare. And I thought, one day I'm going to walk out of there because I'm going to own it. And this other voice said, you're crazy. How do you think you're ever, have you looked at the state of your finances? And I was like, one day I'm doing it. So what I learned was I had an envelope, and every time there was a bit extra, it went into the envelope until I had a down payment. It
That's
gave
a big
me
envelope.
something, it was a big envelope, but I will tell you, it gave me something really exciting to work to.
Yes. Yes. And if it doesn't have to be something tangible, like, for example, I want more time freedom.
What will more time freedom give you?
Oh, time to do the things that I really love to do, relaxing, like yoga, things like that.
Permission to go and do my thing for my body,
Mhm.
permission to go and stretch and look at the world. Yeah, that's tangible.
Hmm. Yes,
In
it is. Yes, like a yoga retreat. I mean,
right,
that
you
is,
know that yoga retreat over there in Cancun? I'm doing that in 2 years. Watch me. And so now all of a sudden, instead of buying that quick magazine or that other, it's like, no, we'll just put you in there one step closer. Thank you.
but notice that that is more fun for me than saying, I really want to get my house repairs done.
Yeah, but you don't want to always have it. You know, my dad taught me a wise thing. He gave me 4 envelopes when I was little. And he said, one's for spending, one's for investing, one's for fun, and one's for gifts. And I still do that. I still do that because I know this one's sensible, this one's responsible, this one's fun. And so, but I make sure that each one gets its time so that I know I feel safe, but I'm having a blast.
Right, right. Like the home repairs has to get done. It's not so much fun because you have to deal with contractors and people and things, but at the end, it feels good that it's that your home is stable and it takes
Look
care
at
of
my
you and you take
beautiful
care of it.
home. Exactly. Look at my beautiful home. Am I not blessed? I am so lucky. And you
Mhm.
say, and I'm so lucky and I've got the money to do it. What does it do? It produces more of the desire to open up to more of that coming. And again, it is not woo woo. This is logical. You cannot see what you're not open to seeing. But when you're open to it, you can see the possibilities.
I think the biggest piece here is the awareness around it to really say, where are my conversations around my body? What are my conversations around my
Exactly.
finances? What are my conversations around um, creating new businesses or ways of doing business or ways of being an employee, things like that. There's a
Yes.
lot around that. And to be aware of the constant complaining or that constant rhetoric of what you're complaining about is most likely what you're creating. More and more of the same.
Absolutely. Just look at that. Did you see how that didn't work out for me? Yeah, there we go again. Well, there you're going to keep going again if that's the same piece that you're going to keep playing. Or you could do one thing different, just one. Doesn't have to be the entire thing. One changes everything.
Embracing it, embracing the change, embracing the change. I heard a wonderful, I was interviewed Mary Morrissey yesterday, and I don't know if you know her work, because she's brilliant with dream building. And she
Yes,
said fear is the gap between what you don't know and what you know. If you look at it as a bridge, as a healthy gap between what you don't know and what you do know, fear completely transforms into something that brings knowledge, brings excitement, brings the newness. And it was a great reframe on fear. I loved
exactly.
it. Hmm.
Exactly. I love that. That it's so smart. And a lot of this work is about reframing. So you've always looked at it this way. What about if we turn it 180 degrees?
Yes.
Possibilities are always there. You just haven't looked.
Yes. So your book, Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint, is all about this. This is the guide to really transforming, and the subtitle is Transforming Through Disentangling Multigenerational Patterns. That's such a word for makes so much sense though.
Yeah. What do we need to put down? What do we need to start creating? Here's the practical steps. Because people say to me, Trance, it's such hard work. That's the other thing I hear. It's such hard work when you do your inner work. And I go, really? Do you play video games? Yes. So when you get to that level that you're struggling with, do you stop the game? No. Why not? Because I want to get to the next level and play. Yep, life is no different.
Yes, I that's true, but it's more of a game and you're doing it in a risk-free environment. When you're playing with things like your health and your finances, it I mean, that's why the family constellation work I think is so interesting, because you get to a place where you're really just stuck. You know what your pattern is and you're lit up by your pattern and you go to try to change it and you hit a brick wall.
Yep,
It's because there's something in there that you have not identified that could be way back in your ancestral pattern that's carried through the emotional DNA generation after generation after generation. It could be 5, 6, 7 generations before you, and it's in there. It makes perfect sense. I mean, your DNA is in you. So
right.
why wouldn't the emotional DNA
Physical
also be there?
and emotional. Yep, they're both there and they are just waiting for you. And a lot of people will say, but I don't have the history. You do. Have a look at a timeline of the events in your life. It's all there. If it isn't in the multi generations because you can't find it, you'll find it in the timeline of your own events.
Really? In your
Yep,
own lifetime?
in your own lifetime. We never don't have that emotional DNA. The way to find it, if you can't find it in your genealogy, go look for it in your events and then pay attention to what you tell yourself about things that happen in all of the different areas, what you've made them mean, how they affect you, and you'll find the patterns sitting right there. And
Oh,
we
I
call
see.
them
So
systemic sentences.
so if you look back and you see you were laughed at in school, then you
Yeah.
have performance anxiety. If you got fired at 16, you have job anxiety, those types of things, right?
And who else had that? We may not know, but we do know that it lives in you. Where did it come from? Somewhere back there.
Do you have a website that we could go to find out about your live events?
Absolutely. Judy Wilkins-Smith.com. You'll also find constellations meditations on the website, and they're unique. They will take you all the way through a constellation and all the way back. There is one for the mother and one for the father.
Oh my God, that's brilliant. Constellation meditations. That's fantastic. Okay, so Judy Wilkins-Smith.com.
That's
So many
it.
great resources. Thank you so much for this. It's really amazing that you've brought this very complex body of work into a simplistic format that's easier to understand. So thank you for that. Thank you
And
so
thank you
much for
for
that.
having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I really get this, and I think it's very powerful. It's a very powerful tool. And if you loved this interview, you can also share it with your friends. You can find our podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts at The Aware Show. You could say, hey, I found out about this really interesting thing called Family Constellations. Listen to this lady. She's amazing, Judy Wilkins-Smith. And there's all sorts of tools and resources there for you as well. So thank you so much, Judy. And thank you so much for listening and being a part of this conversation. Until next time, I invite you to stay aware.